Welcome to District Command Central, your go-to source for the latest news and updates on the Washington Commanders. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a play. The Washington Commanders are standing at a crossroads that feels more like a dead end than a fork in the road. Sitting at 3-5 after a gut-wrenching loss to the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football, the air around the franchise is heavy with frustration, doubt, and a creeping sense of déjà vu. It's that same old feeling. Hope rising too early, expectations soaring after a surprising season, and then, crash, the painful return to reality. This was supposed to be the year that proved last season wasn't a fluke. This was supposed to be the season that showed progress, that established a new standard for what Washington football could be. Instead, it's starting to look like another chapter in a long book of unmet potential, questionable decisions, and an organization searching for direction as the clock ticks louder with each passing week. When the season began, optimism buzzed through the air like static before a storm. Jayden Daniels, the young quarterback with all the talent in the world, was ready to take the next step. Terry McLaurin, the heart and soul of this offense, was healthy and eager to make plays again. The defense, revamped and supposedly deeper than ever, looked poised to cause havoc in the NFC. But football, as it always does, had other plans. A few unlucky bounces, a pile of injuries, and suddenly the Commanders' high hopes have turned into a nightly reminder of just how fragile a season can be. The 3-5 record doesn't just tell the story of missed opportunities. It paints the picture of a team that can't quite put it all together when it matters most. And here's the thing. This was the easy part of the schedule. These first 8 games were supposed to be the foundation, the runway before the turbulence. Losing to teams like the Atlanta Falcons and Chicago Bears, games that were not just winnable but should have been statement victories, has haunted them. Right now, they should be 5-3, maybe even better. Instead, they're clinging to fading playoff hopes while sitting 13th in the NFC, a position that might as well be a waiting room for the offseason. 4 NFC losses already, and 2 more could all but shut the door on any realistic shot at a wild card. The road ahead doesn't offer mercy either. Next up are the Seattle Seahawks and the Detroit Lions, both playoff-caliber teams ready to test every weakness Washington has shown. What's worse is that this team doesn't look like it can hang for 4 full quarters. They start strong, show flashes of potential, and then something always breaks. Sometimes it's the offensive line collapsing, sometimes it's a blown coverage on defense, and too often it's a turnover that shifts the momentum for good. The Commanders' inconsistency is almost predictable now, like a bad movie where you already know the ending. Fans are growing impatient, players are frustrated, and the front office faces a critical question. Is it time to stop dreaming about the playoffs and start thinking about the future? Because here's the truth. The Commanders are running out of time, and maybe they're also running out of excuses. You can only point to bad luck so many times before it becomes a pattern. But still, injuries have been brutal this season, and it's impossible to ignore how much they've shaped the story. Jayden Daniels, the supposed franchise savior, has already missed multiple games. Terry McLaurin, the star receiver, has been in and out of the lineup. On defense, losing Dorrance Armstrong, Dietrich Wise, and Will Harris for extended periods has gutted a unit that was supposed to be the backbone of the team. And now, Laramie Tunsil, their key offseason acquisition meant to protect Daniels, is sidelined with a hamstring injury. It feels like every week there's another name added to the injury report, another key piece pulled from the field before the final whistle blows. Daniels' situation, in particular, is a tough one. The rookie's had 2 separate injuries already, and both times he's come back too soon, trying to inject life into a struggling offense. But at what cost? A hamstring injury can linger, and pushing him too early might do more harm than good. The smart move now might be to think long-term. Get Daniels fully healthy, even if it means sitting him for a few games or even the rest of the year if things spiral further. Washington has been stuck in a cycle of rushing players back, patching holes, and hoping for miracles. Maybe it's time to break that cycle, admit this isn't the year, and focus on building something sustainable. Because the trade deadline is right around the corner, and the Commanders have some decisions to make. The playoffs are slipping away, but there's still time to shape the future, if they're brave enough to face it head-on. This could be the moment where they decide who's really part of the next phase and who's just taking up space on the roster. They only have 6 draft picks heading into next year, which isn't nearly enough for a team that clearly needs a rebuild. So what do? You sell. You move the players you can, stockpile picks, and accept that this is a transition year. Names like Darren Payne, Noah Igbinoghene, Brandon Coleman, and even Marshawn Lattimore could be on the move. Those aren't small decisions, they're foundational ones. Trading any of them sends a message to the locker room, to the fans, and to the rest of the league that the Commanders are done pretending to be something they're not. This isn't a contender right now. This is a team trying to find its identity in a league that doesn't wait for anyone. And as painful as it is to admit, sometimes the best thing you can do is tear it down before you can build it back up. The NFC landscape doesn't make things any easier. The conference is loaded this year. Teams like the Lions, 49ers, Eagles, and Cowboys have raised the bar, and Washington simply isn't playing at that level. To have even a remote shot at sneaking in, they'd likely have to win out or at least come close. But with the way they're playing, that feels more like fantasy than strategy. The final 4 games of the season are all within the NFC East, which means division pride will be on the line. But realistically, those games might only matter for draft positioning by then. Winning out against that lineup? That's not a game plan. That's wishful thinking. Still, there's something deeper here than just wins and losses. There's a culture shift that's needed, something that goes beyond play calling or injury reports. The Commanders have been trying to reinvent themselves for years, from ownership changes to new coaching staff to bringing in promising young talent. But identity in football isn't something you can buy or fake. It's built over time, through adversity, through consistency, and through leadership. That's what's missing right now. You can feel it every time the team takes the field. A lack of energy, a lack of cohesion, a lack of belief. The slowest team in the NFL. That's how some analysts have started to describe them, and not just in terms of speed. It's about pace, about urgency, about reaction. This team plays like it's stuck in quicksand, always half a step behind its opponent, both physically and mentally. It's not just about running faster. It's about thinking faster, adjusting faster, playing with conviction. The Chiefs exposed all of that on Monday night. How Washington hesitates, how it reacts instead of dictates, how it fails to seize momentum when it has the chance. That kind of mentality doesn't win football games, and it certainly doesn't survive in a league that punishes hesitation. So what happens now? The answer depends on how honest the organization wants to be with itself. They can keep pretending that a playoff run is possible, keep throwing everything at a sinking ship, or they can pivot. Focus on health. Protect Daniels. Build through the draft. Use the rest of this season to evaluate who's really worth keeping around and who's not. That's not giving up. That's being strategic. The Commanders have been chasing short-term success for too long. Maybe it's time to think long-term. For fans, it's a tough pill to swallow. After last year's surprise run, after all the off-season hype, no one wanted to be back in this position. But if there's one thing football teaches, it's patience. Dynasties aren't built overnight, and redemption doesn't come easy. Washington has a chance, not to save this season, but to save the future. That starts with honesty, humility, and a plan that looks beyond just the next Sunday. The nightmare season might not have a happy ending, but maybe, just maybe, it can be the wake-up call the Commanders needed to finally stop repeating the same mistakes and start writing a different story. If you're enjoying the coverage, make sure to smash that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts on the Commanders' latest moves. We want to hear from you. All right, guys, buckle up, because what's been brewing inside the Washington Commanders locker room over the last 48 hours might just be one of the wildest behind-the-scenes stories we've seen in the NFL this season. You know how we always talk about how head coaches try to keep everything under wraps, control the message, smile at press conferences, and play nice even when the whole building's burning down? Well, apparently Dan Quinn. Yeah, that Dan Quinn, the cool-headed, defensive mastermind who usually sounds like a Zen monk in interviews, just absolutely lost it. And not in a small, hey, I'm disappointed kind of way. No, I'm talking full-on explosion, locker room doors shaking, coaches trying to calm him down, players awkwardly avoiding eye contact type of meltdown. The kind of scene that leaves everyone in silence afterward, like that awkward moment after thunder when your ears are still ringing. From what's being whispered around team insiders, this all started after Sunday's loss. a game that many believe the Commanders absolutely should have won. The mood in the locker room was already tense. Players frustrated, some pointing fingers quietly, others staring at the floor. And then, something happened between Quinn and one of his starters. Nobody's naming names yet, but several people close to the team have hinted that it involved a defensive player, someone who's been clashing with Quinn's tough love approach since training camp. And apparently, this time, the confrontation crossed a line. Witnesses say Quinn's face turned red, his voice echoed through the locker room, and then came the words that have been replayed in everyone's head since. "He doesn't play for me anymore." Boom. Just like that. Now, if you know Quinn's history, you know that's not something he says lightly. This is a guy who's all about second chances, about building a culture, about lifting his guys up after mistakes. He's been known to defend his players publicly even when they blow assignments. But the fact that he snapped like that tells you how deep this must have gone. Maybe it was insubordination, maybe it was effort, maybe it was something said in the heat of the moment. But however you spin it, that kind of reaction doesn't happen unless a line gets crossed. And here's the kicker. Multiple sources inside the organization are saying that Quinn's words weren't just an emotional outburst. He meant it. He told his staff afterward, "I can't trust him anymore." That's the death sentence for a player in the NFL, especially under a coach like Quinn. Now picture the scene. The locker room is still filled with players taking off their pads. The media is waiting outside the doors, PR staff, trying to keep everything quiet. And Quinn just drops that bomb in front of everyone. Some players reportedly froze. Others tried to intervene, but Quinn waved them off. It wasn't a screaming match between equals. It was more like a general declaring that a soldier is out of the army. You could feel the temperature in the room drop instantly. Later, when reporters asked why a certain player didn't appear in the second half, Quinn brushed it off with one of those cold, flat coach answers. That was a decision we made internally. But now it's obvious what he meant. He didn't just bench him for the game. He benched him forever. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Some of the Commanders' players, especially the veterans, are torn. They respect Quinn's authority. They love his defensive mind. But they also know that losing control like that in front of the team can send ripples through the whole roster. One anonymous player even told a local reporter off the record, "You could see the fear in guys' eyes. Nobody's ever seen Quinn like that." Another said, "It wasn't about one play, man. It was about weeks of tension." So clearly, this wasn't an isolated explosion. This was something building up for a while. And now it's out in the open for everyone to feel. The rumor mill has been spinning nonstop since then. Some say it started on the practice field earlier in the week. There was a moment during drills when this same player reportedly walked off frustrated after a miscommunication with the coaching staff. Quinn, being the old-school coach that he is, doesn't take kindly to that kind of attitude. He's from that Bill Parcells, Pete Carroll lineage where accountability is sacred. You mess up, you own it, you move on. But you don't roll your eyes, you don't mumble under your breath, and you sure as hell don't show up the coach in front of teammates. And apparently, that's exactly what happened again on game day. One of those heated sideline moments where cameras might not have caught everything, but everyone on the bench noticed. And here's where the Commanders' front office is in a bind. Because if Quinn is serious about cutting this player out, that means someone with real playing time, possibly even a starter, is about to hit the bench indefinitely. And in the middle of a season that's already teetering on the edge, with fans growing restless, ownership watching closely, and the media already circling like vultures, that's not the kind of distraction you want. But if Quinn backs down now, he looks weak. He looks like he lost the battle he himself declared. So it's a classic standoff. Pride, authority, team chemistry, and maybe even a career hanging in the balance. Now, the whispers are getting louder that Quinn's explosion wasn't just about this one player. Some insiders think he's been under massive pressure behind the scenes. The Commanders' defense, which was supposed to be his masterpiece, hasn't exactly been lights out this year. They've had flashes of brilliance, sure, but also moments where everything fell apart. And when that happens, the head coach feels it more than anyone. You can almost imagine Quinn walking into his office after that game, closing the door, and replaying every blown coverage in his mind. Then a player mouths off or breaks discipline, and that frustration finally erupts like a volcano. It's human, it's emotional, and in the NFL, it's also fatal. Because now the story isn't about missed tackles or bad calls. It's about the coach losing his cool. The crazy part? Some of the younger players reportedly loved it. They saw it as Quinn drawing a line in the sand, reclaiming control, reminding everyone that the locker room still belongs to him. One rookie even said, "Coach was fired up. It made me respect him more. You could feel he cared." That's the other side of this coin. Sometimes, a fiery moment can pull a team together. Sometimes it burns everything down. Which way this one goes might define the rest of the Commanders' season. And you know how this league works. By Monday morning, every insider show, every podcast, every talk radio segment will be dissecting those 5 words. He doesn't play for me anymore. They'll replay them, analyze the tone, speculate about who it was. Social media sleuths are already matching clips from the game, watching the sideline angles, looking for the player who didn't look happy, who stayed on the bench too long, who avoided eye contact. And the worst part for Washington? Once the narrative starts rolling like that, it's impossible to stop. Even if Quinn tries to downplay it tomorrow, the genie's out of the bottle. By the way, this is not the first time Quinn's intensity has bubbled over. Back in his Atlanta days, there were whispers, nothing this dramatic, but murmurs that he sometimes let his emotions take over. In moments of frustration, players who love him say that's what makes him real. Detractors say it's what cost him control in the past. So this latest explosion might be another example of that fire burning too hot. The challenge now is whether he can pull the team back together and turn this into a rallying cry instead of a dividing line. If you think about it, this whole thing feels like one of those defining moments in a locker room story. Either the Commanders come out next week looking sharper, more disciplined, ready to prove that their coach's outburst meant something, or they start to fracture, the whispers grow into leaks, and suddenly you've got a team eating itself from the inside. And given how brutal the NFC East can be, that's a nightmare scenario. You can't afford division when you're trying to climb out of the middle of the pack. So, for now, all we know is this. Dan Quinn lost his temper, a player lost his spot, and the rest of the locker room is walking on eggshells. No official statements, no names confirmed, but the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes of Quinn's words bouncing through that locker room. He doesn't play for me anymore. That's not just a statement. That's a declaration. It's a warning to everyone else wearing that jersey. Play hard, stay disciplined, or you might be next. Thanks for tuning into District Command Central. Make sure to subscribe and follow us for all the Commanders news you need. Until next time, keep the faith and hail to the Commanders.